He humiliated me in front of the hiring manager, stole the job I wanted, and laughed as I walked home in tears. But what he didn't know was that day would turn me into a boss neither of us ever saw coming. My name is Ethan Monroe, and the worst day of my life wasn't when I got rejected by the company I dreamed of working at since college. It was the day I found out my own brother, my flesh and blood, was the reason I lost that opportunity. For years, I had studied hard, stayed up late reading business strategy books, built a humble but powerful portfolio, and finally landed an interview with Viridian Tech, one of the fastest-growing startup incubators in the country. The position was for a junior strategist, entry-level, but it was my gateway to building the life I'd always dreamed of. I was nervous but prepared, dressed in my one good suit, and had rehearsed answers for every potential question. My older brother, Derek, who had always overshadowed me, worked in marketing and claimed he could put in a good word for me. He was charming, popular, and effortlessly successful, everything I wasn't. When I told him about my interview, he smiled, nodded, and even offered to drive me there, saying, "You're gonna kill it, little bro." What I didn't know was that he had already been eyeing the exact same role. But instead of telling me, he offered to help just so he could sabotage me. On the morning of the interview, I was waiting outside our apartment building when he finally showed up, 40 minutes late, claiming traffic had been horrible. My nerves were already on edge. We got there just in time, and I rushed into the building, heart pounding. But inside the meeting room, the atmosphere was cold. The hiring manager glanced at my resume with mild interest, then asked a few rushed questions. I tried to stay focused, but something felt off. By the time I walked out, I knew I had bombed it. That same night, Derek came home grinning. "Man, tough luck," he said. "They told me you seemed unprepared." I stared at him. "You spoke to them?" I asked. "Yeah, of course," he replied casually. "I just happened to run into their VP last week and mentioned you were a little green, but had potential." My blood ran cold. He'd planted doubt before I even had a chance. I confronted him, but he played dumb, then laughed it off. "Don't take it so personally, Ethan. It's just business." But 2 weeks later, I found out the truth. He didn't just sabotage my chances. He applied for the same role, got the job, and never told me until I saw his LinkedIn update, excited to join Viridian Tech as their new junior strategist. That's when something inside me snapped. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat in silence and decided I would never let him have that kind of power over me again. I started waking up at 5 a.m. every day. I stopped playing video games, stopped hanging out with friends, and locked myself in my room building what I called Project Reboot. I had always dreamed of running my own company, but never had the guts. Now, I had rage. I had betrayal. I had fuel. I poured everything I had into an idea I had been toying with since college, a digital solutions platform that helped small brands grow through customized AI analytics and marketing tools. I learned coding, UX design, pitch deck creation. I signed up for free online classes. I sold old electronics to buy a refurbished laptop with better processing power. I skipped meals to afford hosting fees. Every night, Derek came home smug from his job, talking about team strategy this and data-driven that, while I stayed silent, pretending to play on my phone, secretly testing A/B algorithms on marketing models. In 6 months, I had a working beta version. I called it Neuroscale. I pitched it to every investor who'd listen. Most ignored me. One finally gave me a shot. I got $25,000 in seed money, enough to rent a co-working space and hire 2 freelancers, an algorithm expert from Brazil and a graphic designer from Estonia. We worked nonstop. We built dashboards, automation funnels, client onboarding processes. Within 8 months, we had our first 10 clients. Word spread. My revenge wasn't even about Derek anymore. It was about becoming something he could never sabotage again. But life has a twisted sense of humor. One day, I got an email from a company interested in using Neuroscale. They were struggling with marketing KPIs and looking to optimize their ad spend. The company? Viridian Tech. I blinked twice. At first, I thought it was a joke. Then I saw the contact name Derek Monroe, marketing lead. I laughed. After all that, after stealing my job, he needed my help. I didn't respond right away. I made him wait. Then I scheduled a Zoom call under my alias, E.M. Carter, co-founder, NS. When he joined, he didn't recognize me at first. I wore glasses, grew out a beard, lowered my voice. He pitched his company's issues with all the fake charm he had. I let him talk. Then I turned on my camera and said, "Hey, Derek. Remember me?" His face turned white. He stammered, trying to backtrack. Ethan? I didn't know this was. I cut him off. Let me guess. You just happened to stumble across Neuroscale. Silence. I told him I'd think about it and ended the call. 2 weeks later, I met the CEO of Viridian Tech at a tech conference. He was intrigued by what I had built. We had coffee, I gave a private demo, and he offered to acquire Neuroscale. But I declined. I made a counteroffer, a strategic partnership with a board seat. He agreed. That's how I became a major decision-maker at Viridian Tech without ever working there. And guess whose department now reported directly to me? That's right, Derek. The first meeting we had, he couldn't even look me in the eye. I didn't humiliate him. I didn't fire him. I let him keep his job, but every task he worked on went through me. Every proposal needed my signature. And every time he walked into a boardroom, he had to acknowledge me. His younger brother, the one he tried to crush, was now his boss's boss. I didn't destroy him. I let him stew in the discomfort of knowing he lost, not because I fought back, but because I outgrew him. Because I turned his betrayal into a company. And because real revenge doesn't scream. It builds empires in silence. You'd think being in a position of power over the person who once humiliated you would feel like a permanent victory, but power reveals more than it rewards. After I secured the partnership with Viridian Tech and became a board member, I thought the hard part was over. But being on the inside, with access to internal reports, financial statements, and boardroom whispers, I quickly learned that Derek's manipulative charm hadn't changed. He had just gotten better at hiding it. Despite his smiling face and polished presentations, he had been using shady subcontractors for campaign work, outsourcing to low-grade freelancers while pocketing the difference. The numbers looked clean on the surface, but as someone who built Neuroscale from the ground up, I knew how to sniff out dirty data. I didn't act immediately. Instead, I did something worse. I waited. I collected. I watched. Every time he submitted an expense report, I quietly forwarded it to a compliance analyst I hired privately. Every time he scheduled a meeting, I joined silently as an observer. His team began to feel my presence before I even spoke. And when I finally began questioning the ROI figures he reported, he stammered through weak justifications that didn't hold up under scrutiny. But what started as tactical revenge soon became a war with consequences I didn't anticipate. One evening, I got a call from my mom. She sounded worried. "Your brother's been acting strange," she said. "He barely talks anymore. Says people at work are turning against him." I didn't respond. What was I supposed to say? That I was the shadow slowly pulling his world apart? That I was doing to him what he once did to me, only smarter? Guilt wasn't part of the original plan, but it crept in quietly. Still, I had a mission. Neuroscale was growing fast, and with our new partnership, we were onboarding over 200 clients. But success comes at a cost. I started missing meals again. Sleep became a luxury. My personal life vanished. My apartment was a glorified server room. Every time my phone buzzed, it was another notification about a bug, a delay, a request. I was winning, but losing myself in the process. Meanwhile, Derek was crumbling. I saw it in his eyes during meetings, red-rimmed, exhausted, his usual cocky confidence reduced to polite nods and desperate smiles. He was slipping, and he knew it. Then one day, during a major strategy review with the board, Derek presented a quarter-long marketing campaign that had allegedly doubled conversions. But when I ran the metrics through Neuroscale's backend, the numbers were inflated, like, dangerously so. It was the break I'd been waiting for. I requested a closed-door meeting with the CEO and laid out the discrepancies, complete with screenshots, invoices, and timestamps. The CEO, a smart but cold operator, listened without emotion. After I finished, he nodded and said, "We'll handle it." That afternoon, Derek was called into a room and didn't come out for 2 hours. When he did, his face was pale, his hands trembling. He was placed on probation pending investigation, stripped of leadership access, and sent home. My phone buzzed that night. A text from Derek. It said, "I know it was you." I stared at the screen, heart beating faster than it should have. I didn't reply. A week later, HR confirmed that Derek had resigned quietly. No drama. No farewell post. Just vanished. My victory was complete. Or so I thought. But the silence that followed was unsettling. No texts from family. No emails from him. No activity online. My mother called again, this time more frantic. "Ethan, I don't care what happened at work, but you need to talk to your brother. He's not doing well. He won't leave his apartment. He's not eating. He blames himself. Or maybe he blames you. I don't know anymore. I tried to brush it off, but that night, sleep refused to come. I kept hearing that laugh, his laugh, when he told me I'd never make it. And I remembered how much that crushed me. How I walked home feeling like a joke. And now, I had done the same. Was I justified? Yes. Was it deserved? Probably. But was it worth watching my own brother unravel? That's when I made a decision. I took a break from work, told my assistant to reschedule all meetings, and drove to Derek's apartment. I hadn't been there in years. The place was dark, curtains drawn, piles of takeout boxes outside the door. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. Finally, I texted him. Open the door. I brought food. A minute passed. Then two. Then a click. The door opened slightly, and I saw him. Beard grown out, sunken eyes, baggy sweatshirt. My brother. My enemy. My mirror. He looked at me like I was a ghost. Why are you here? He asked. To talk, I said. You won. What more do you want? He muttered. I didn't come here to gloat, Derek. I came to end this. I stepped inside. The place was a mess. Pizza boxes, beer cans, unopened mail. We sat down in silence. For once, there was no power dynamic, no boardroom politics, just two brothers who'd lost their way. I told him everything. How I knew he sabotaged me. How I built Neuroscale. How I watched him burn while I rose. And how empty it all felt now. He didn't deny any of it. Just listened. Then he said something I didn't expect. You were always the better one. I just couldn't handle watching you catch up. That hit harder than any insult ever had. For the first time, I saw the insecurity behind the arrogance, the fear behind the sabotage, and maybe the guilt behind the silence. We talked for hours, not just about the past, but about what was next. I didn't forgive him, not entirely, but I understood him. And sometimes, that's enough to start again. I left his apartment with a strange mix of emotions, closure, relief, maybe even a touch of hope. But life wasn't done with me yet. 2 weeks later, I received a notice from the board. Viridian Tech was under review for multiple accounting inconsistencies, bigger than anything related to Derek. Turns out, someone higher up had been funneling funds into shell vendors, and now the SEC was getting involved. I was pulled into internal audits, asked to provide evidence, testify in closed sessions. The CEO who once welcomed me now avoided me. Whispers of dissolution began swirling. And just when I thought I had reached the top, I realized I was standing on a sinking ship. Neuroscale was safe, but its biggest partner was about to implode. And with it, my empire. That's when I got an email from Derek. Just 2 words. Check this. Attached was a spreadsheet. Encrypted. Loaded with transactions, names, routing paths, things that hadn't been visible before. I decrypted it and froze. It was a roadmap of the financial fraud inside Viridian Tech, compiled by Derek before he left. My brother, the saboteur, was now the whistleblower. And in that moment, I understood we weren't enemies anymore. We were allies against something far more dangerous. But exposing the truth would mean going against the very people who had made me powerful. It would mean risking everything I had built. And it would require trusting the one person I never thought I'd trust again, my brother. I stared at the screen for a long time, reading the spreadsheet over and over until my eyes began to burn, not just from fatigue, but from the weight of what it meant. Derek had been digging through Viridian Tech's dark corners long before he was forced out, documenting, cross-referencing, quietly building a case. He hadn't just sent me a spreadsheet, he'd handed me a weapon. And maybe, just maybe, this was his way of trying to right a few of the wrongs between us. Still, this wasn't just about family now. This was corporate war, and if I used this information, I wouldn't just be destroying Viridian Tech as senior leadership. I'd also be risking Neuroscale's future, its clients, its partnerships, and every employee who had trusted me to lead them. I couldn't decide alone. So, I did something I never imagined I would. I met Derek again, this time not as rivals, not as broken brothers, but as 2 men trying to navigate the wreckage of their choices. We sat at a quiet rooftop bar, no drama, no tension. He explained everything. How he noticed discrepancies in the budgets early on, how he tried to flag them internally but was shut down, how he kept copies of everything just in case, and how, when he saw me starting to rise inside Viridian Tech, he panicked. I thought you'd be just like them, he admitted. But then I watched you stand up to me. expose me, and still show up at my door. I didn't say anything at first. I just listened. And then I asked, "What do you want out of this?" He looked surprised by the question. "Nothing. I'm not looking for redemption. I just don't want to see more people get crushed by them like we crushed each other." And that was it, the line that broke the cycle. Together, we made a plan. I gathered my legal team, brought in a corporate ethics investigator, and prepared a controlled release of the documents to federal authorities. Derek would remain anonymous for now, acting as an external informant. I, on the other hand, was stepping into the fire publicly. It was risky, but I knew it was the only way to protect Neuroscale and hold the real criminals accountable. The next 3 months were pure chaos. News broke. Viridian Tech's CFO was arrested. 2 board members resigned. A third fled the country. The CEO tried to play dumb, but was eventually exposed as the architect behind a multi-million-dollar laundering operation masked under global contractor fees. Share prices crashed. Lawsuits rained down like fire. But Neuroscale? We survived. No, more than that, we rose. Because in the middle of the storm, we stood for something. We had data, transparency, truth. And as the world watched Viridian Tech burn, Neuroscale attracted every major client looking for an ethical, transparent alternative. My inbox was flooded. Investment firms, tech conglomerates, media offers. Everyone wanted to talk to the guy who blew the whistle on his own partner. And just like that, I went from boardroom rookie to tech industry titan. But that's not where the story ends. You see, I never told the world about Derek's role. Not because I owed him, but because he had already paid the price. Quietly, I offered him a consulting role inside Neuroscale. He declined at first, saying he needed time. I respected that. But 6 months later, he showed up at one of our team retreats, clean-shaven, focused, maybe even healed. And this time, he didn't show up as my saboteur. He showed up as my strategist. Today, Derek runs our risk analysis division. He's built one of the most comprehensive fraud detection systems in the industry. Irony, I know. But sometimes, the people who've fallen the hardest are the ones who know exactly where the cracks are. As for me, I'm no longer the guy trying to prove himself. I've built something that stands without validation. Something that grew from betrayal, brokenness, and brutal ambition, but evolved into purpose, clarity, and impact. I walk into boardrooms now with my head high, not because I won, but because I learned. My family's relationship is still a work in progress, but there are dinners again. Laughter. Forgiveness, even if it's slow. And every once in a while, when someone asks how I built an empire out of nothing, I just smile and say, it started when my brother ruined my job interview. Because sometimes, the worst thing someone does to you is the very thing that sets you free. And the revenge? It's not just rising higher, it's rising better. Not to destroy them, but to remind yourself that you didn't break, you rebuilt. And you built something so big, even the people who tried to bury you now stand in its shadow. That's how you win. Not just by getting even, but by getting ahead together.